They say some places remember, not like people do, with memories and regrets, but more like how a wound remembers the knife. The small town of Ashridge had long forgotten about the Black Hollow Lighthouse. But the thing is, the lighthouse hadn't forgotten about them. When Ethan Granger inherited that lighthouse from his estranged uncle, he honestly thought it was some kind of elaborate, sick joke. He was a software engineer living in Chicago, a city guy through and through. The last thing he knew how to do was keep a lighthouse, but the will was crystal clear, and it read, "To my nephew, Ethan, I leave the Shining Tower. May it guide you as it once guided me." The locals had a nickname for it, the Shining, and no, it wasn't because of its bright, guiding light. It was because of what it supposedly did to anyone who stayed there for too long. But Ethan was skeptical. He was also broke, and his life in the city was crumbling around him. So he saw this bizarre inheritance as a strange sort of escape. He packed up his life into a few boxes, threw them in his car, and drove north to the rugged edge of Maine, to a place where the sea met the cliffs like a blade slicing into skin. The lighthouse stood completely alone, a stark black spire against a perpetually gray sky. The sea roared and crashed below, and the gulls circled overhead like vultures waiting for their next meal. The air was thick with the smell of salt and rust, but there was something else mixed in, something sour and unsettling. Stepping inside, Ethan was surprised to find the place mostly intact. Sure, it was covered in a thick layer of dust, but the furniture was solid, the old generator sputtered to life, and the light at the top still rotated. On a desk in the keeper's quarters, a leather-bound journal was waiting for him. He opened it, and the first page read, "If you hear the bell, do not answer. If you see the light, do not follow. If you dream of the sea, wake up." Ethan just laughed it off. Creepy old man, he muttered to himself. Looking back, that was the exact moment he should have turned around and left forever. The first night passed without much incident. Ethan poured himself some cheap whiskey, started flipping through his uncle's journal, and listened to the relentless wind battering against the windows. The journal was mostly filled with what seemed like the paranoid ramblings of a man losing his mind. There were pages and pages about the shimmer in the fog, the drowned ones, and the bell that tolls for the living. Then, at exactly 3:03 a.m., Ethan was jolted awake by the sound of a bell. He sat bolt upright in bed, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound was distant, metallic, and eerily rhythmic. He scrambled for his phone. No signal. Of course, he peered out the window. The sea was surprisingly calm. The lighthouse's beams swept across the dark water in its steady rhythm, but something was wrong. The light wasn't white. For a split second, it was a deep blood red. He blinked hard, and it was white again. Just tired, he mumbled, trying to rationalize it. But the bell kept ringing. The next day, Ethan decided to explore the tower properly. The old spiral staircase groaned and protested under his weight with every step. At the very top, the lens room was pristine, almost unnaturally clean. The giant Fresnel lens gleamed like a priceless jewel. But when he looked out across the water, he saw something impossible, a shimmer. It was hanging over the water like the heat haze you see rising from asphalt on a hot day. And it seemed to pulse faintly, in perfect time with the distant ringing of the bell. He blinked, and just like that, it was gone. That night, the dreams began. He dreamt he was underwater, sinking slowly into the crushing, silent darkness. Pale, ghostly hands reached for him from the abyss. Eyes opened in the dark all around him. A voice, ancient and cold, whispered, "You came back." He woke up gasping for air, his lungs burning as if he'd actually been drowning. He glanced over at the journal on the knitstand. There was a new entry in handwriting that looked disturbingly like his own. It said, "You saw them? They see you now." That was it. Ethan tried to leave. He packed his car in a panic, but the road was gone. It had just vanished, as if washed out by a storm that never happened. The town was completely unreachable. The radio in his car and the one in the lighthouse only hissed with static. His phone was completely dead. That night, he saw them. Figures began to materialize in the thick, rolling fog. They were dripping wet, their clothes torn and ancient. Their eyes glowed with a faint, sickly light. They just stood there, at the very edge of the cliff, staring up at the tower, at him. He frantically locked the doors, boarded up the windows with old planks he found in the basement. But it didn't matter. The bell just rang louder, more insistent. He opened the journal, his hands shaking. A passage read. They drowned in 1874. The ship crashed on the rocks. The keeper lit the red lamp to warn them, but it was too late. Now they come for the light. Ethan ran outside and screamed into the night. I'm not him. I'm not the one you want. But the sea doesn't care who you are. Then the light turned red again, but this time it stayed red. The entire landscape was bathed in its horrifying crimson glow. In a frenzy, Ethan ran to the top of the tower and smashed the control panel. He ripped out wires, trying to kill the power. But the light kept turning, relentless and red. And then he heard it, footsteps, coming up the spiral staircase. Wet, heavy, dragging. He scrambled down and hid in the dark, damp basement, clutching the journal to his chest like a holy relic. The pages started flipping on their own, a dry, rustling sound in the suffocating silence. The words on the page began to bleed and run, like ink dissolving in water. A new sentence formed. They want the keeper, they want the light. They want to shine again. He caught his reflection in a pool of murky water on the floor, but the face staring back wasn't his. It was his uncle's. Ethan stopped sleeping. He couldn't. But the dreams came anyway, even when he was awake. He saw the shipwreck, a storm of splintering wood and terrified screams. He saw the jagged rocks tearing through the hull, tearing through flesh. And through it all, the red light of the tower pulsed like a malevolent heartbeat. He saw the keeper, his uncle, standing at the top of the lighthouse, his arms raised to the stormy sky, laughing maniacally as the ship was broken apart by the waves. The journal explained everything. They made me do it. The final entry read, "The light is theirs now." I only kept it burning for them. In that moment of chilling clarity, Ethan finally understood. The lighthouse wasn't a beacon of safety. It was a lure, a siren's song made of steel and glass. And now it wanted him. On the 7th night, the bell rang louder than it ever had before, a deafening, soul-shaking toll. The entire tower began to shake. The sea rose in impossible waves, crashing against the cliffs. And the drowned ones, they started to climb. He could see their pale shapes scrambling up the rock face. Ethan stood in the lens room, bathed in the all-consuming red light. He stared into its hypnotic core. He could feel it pulsing in his chest, in his skull, in the very marrow of his bones. It was a part of him now. He heard their whispers, no longer from the outside, but from within his own mind. Shine for us. He slowly turned the massive lens, aiming the beam out toward the churning sea. Out of the darkness, a boat appeared, small, wooden, and empty. A vessel waiting for a new passenger. He knew what he had to do. He took a deep breath, stepped directly into the crimson beam, and vanished. Weeks later, a hiker stumbled upon the abandoned Black Hollow lighthouse. The light was still turning, as red as fresh blood. The journal was gone. The only thing left behind was a small, single note on the desk in the keeper's quarters. It said, "I see them now. I shine for them. If you hear the bell, do not answer. If you see the light, do not follow. If you dream of the sea." It's already too late. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. Stay safe out there.